In court, my daughter-in-law ridiculed my son without mercy. But when I quietly walked in behind him, the judge froze, eyes wide, whispering, "How? Why are you here?" The entire courtroom fell silent, every arrogant face turning pale with panic. And then a secret I carried into that room began to unravel, leaving everyone speechless. Dear friends, before I start, tell me in the comments which city or country you're watching from. Have you ever faced something like this? Share your story in the comments as well. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real life stories like mine. Hello, friends. My name is Margaret. I am 52 years old and I live in Plano, Texas. Today, I want to share with you the most shocking, suspenseful, and painful experience of my life, an experience that tested my patience, my courage, and ultimately my ability to protect my family. This is my story, and I am telling it as it happened from my eyes. It all began when my son, James, got married to Olivia. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was charming, polite, and respectful, but only for show. Very soon, her true intentions became clear. Olivia was ambitious in a dangerous way. She had plans that I could sense, but I didn't yet have all the proof. She wanted control over my son, our family, and ultimately all our property and wealth. I noticed how she subtly tried to manipulate James, planting seeds of doubt about me and creating unnecessary tension. I remember the day I realized she was not just trying to dominate our family dynamics. She was planning something far bigger. Olivia wanted to lock our property and assets under her name, and eventually she planned to leave the country with everything. She had meticulously documented everything so that it would appear legal and beyond reproach, but I could see through her schemes. I had seen manipulation before and I knew how to track it. One evening, I found a document that revealed her intentions clearly, a plan to secure every valuable asset and even to falsely frame James for financial misconduct if necessary. My heart sank, but I knew I had to act carefully. This wasn't just a minor disagreement. It was a full-scale plan to destroy my family from the inside. And Olivia had the audacity to smile while plotting. I decided to gather every piece of evidence quietly, emails, transaction records, secret notes, plans, even the small hints she left behind, they all went into a secure folder. I couldn't risk James discovering this too soon. He might confront her impulsively, and that could ruin everything. I had to be patient. The suspense escalated when I discovered something horrifying. Suspense escalated when I discovered something horrifying. Olivia hidden the evidence. The weapon, a knife, was somewhere. It couldn't be linked to her, but I had reasons to suspect where it was. Her greed knew no limits. She wanted everything, even lives, to achieve her goals, but I kept my calm. I needed absolute certainty and evidence before acting. Months passed as I continued to quietly collect information. Every plan Olivia made, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate, I documented. Every minor lie, every hidden record, and every suspicious action, I tracked them all. I could see the threads of her plan. Lock the property, take everything abroad, and leave James and me powerless, but she hadn't counted on me. Finally, the day came when, everything ready, the court date for one of her schemes, her attempt to seize control of James's. I walked into that courtroom with a quiet confidence. I had the proof, I had the evidence, and I had the truth on my side. The moment I stood there, Olivia's face fell. She realized that this time she had underestimated me. I presented everything systematically, the documents, the financial records, the proofs of her manipulations, and even hints of her past criminal actions. Every secret she had tried to hide was laid bare. The judge, initially surprised by my presence, watched as I methodically revealed the layers of her plan. With each piece of evidence, James's innocence became clearer and Olivia's manipulations were exposed for all to see. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Every arrogant expression, every smug smile that Olivia had carried began to fade. People whispered, shocked by the meticulous evidence I presented. I explained calmly how Olivia had planned to steal our assets, lock our property under her name, and even leave the country with everything. The court listened intently as I revealed the final pieces, her attempts at murder, her hidden records, and her manipulative strategies. By the end of the day, justice was clear. James's name was cleared and Olivia's plans were fully exposed. The court ensured that she could not access any of our property or assets, and her manipulations were documented permanently. I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion, knowing that the months of planning, patience, and careful observation had paid off. As I left the courtroom, I felt a profound sense of closure. The suspense, the fear, and the constant tension had finally ended. I had not only protected my son, but I had also ensured that truth and justice prevailed. My story is one of vigilance, courage, and the relentless pursuit of truth. And while the scars of these experiences remain, I know that I have strengthened both James and myself for whatever challenges the future may bring. Friends, this is my story. The secrets revealed, the manipulations exposed, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deceit. Life will always test us, but with patience, observation, and courage, we can face any challenge and emerge victorious. After that intense day in court, I thought the worst was behind us. But the truth is, Olivia had already caused enough damage behind the scenes that I knew my work was far from over. I had to remain vigilant. Every step, every word, every glance could be part of her strategy. I couldn't allow James or myself to be caught off guard again. I remember sitting in our Plano living room, looking out at the streets where I'd spent most of my life. The calm suburban houses betrayed nothing of the storm that had just passed inside the courtroom. James was beside me, exhausted but relieved. His trust in me, the way he looked at me, told me that all those months of patience, observation, and careful documentation had paid off, but I wasn't celebrating yet. I had learned long ago that someone like Olivia doesn't give up easily. The very next morning, I began reviewing all the evidence once again. Emails, bank statements, hidden transaction records, even her subtle personal notes. Every piece of information painted a picture of a woman who would stop at nothing for greed. I realized that Olivia had cleverly tried to pin every possible blame on James' small incidents, hidden fees, minor property disputes. If I hadn't noticed them, he could have been trapped in a legal nightmare. Then came the day I discovered the most shocking part of her plan. Olivia had not only manipulated finances, but had also committed a murder, cleverly covering it up so no one could connect it to her. The thought of it made my hands tremble, but I reminded myself to stay calm. Panic would be useless. I needed proof, documentation, and strategy. I retraced her steps, pieced together hints, and made connections between seemingly minor details. Slowly, a pattern emerged, a pattern that would allow me to reveal the truth in court without a single doubt. James and I spent countless evenings discussing our next steps. He was eager, almost too eager to confront her directly, but I restrained him. I had learned over decades that impulsive reactions never helped. We devised a strategy together, carefully planning when and how to present the evidence, while also ensuring that our legal footing was solid. One evening, as I reviewed her financial statements, I noticed a suspicious entry linked to a small offshore account. Seemed minor, but to me, it was a key piece of the puzzle. Olivia had intended to transfer our assets abroad, quietly locking James out of any access. My heart raced as I documented this, knowing that if I could present this in court, it would expose her entire scheme. But Olivia was clever. She left subtle traps everywhere, minor inconsistencies, planted doubts, hidden documents meant to confuse us. I spent long nights decoding her plans, and each discovery brought a mix of fear and determination. Fear because of what she was capable of, and determination because I had to protect James and ensure justice prevailed. In the middle of this chaos, there were moments of reflection. I often wondered how someone could be so calculated, so devoid of conscience. And yet I realized that dwelling on her morality was useless. I had to focus on strategy, on evidence, on truth. That was my weapon. That was what would safeguard our family. Finally, after weeks of preparation, we were ready to return to court. This time, it wasn't just about finances or minor disputes. I had gathered every shred of proof, financial records, transaction logs, hidden notes, and even hints of her criminal activities. Everything was in place to expose Olivia completely. Everything was in place to expose Olivia completely. As we walked into the courtroom, I felt a strange calmness. I knew what I had to do, and I knew that the evidence would speak louder than any words. Olivia, as expected, carried her usual smirk, unaware that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. The judge, familiar with her manipulations but unaware of the full scope, looked up curiously as we entered. I could see the subtle tension in her posture. She knew I was a force to be reckoned with. The court proceedings began, and I presented my evidence piece by piece. I explained how Olivia had tried to manipulate James, how she had hidden financial records, and how she had attempted to secure our assets abroad. Each revelation was a blow to her credibility. The courtroom murmured, astonished by the level of detail and foresight. Then came the moment that shocked everyone. I revealed the connections that pointed toward her criminal acts, including the murder she had committed for financial gain. I did not dramatize. I simply presented the facts supported by meticulous records. The judge, lawyers, and audience were visibly stunned. Olivia's plan, which she had believed was foolproof, was unraveling in front of her very eyes. James sat beside me, quietly absorbing the unfolding events. I could see pride in his eyes, not for me, but for the strength and resilience he had witnessed and learned from me. My mission was clear: protect him, reveal the truth, and ensure justice. And in that courtroom, under the watchful eyes of the law, the full truth came to light. By the end of the day, Olivia manipulations had been fully exposed. She could no longer touch the assets, and her criminal intentions were now a matter of public record. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. As we left the courthouse, I felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that months of careful planning, observation, and strategic action had safeguarded our family and revealed the truth. But the story wasn't over, not entirely. Life had tested us, and it would continue to test us. Yet in that moment, I knew that vigilance, patience, and a steadfast commitment to truth were the tools that ensured we could face any challenge with confidence. I had turned fear into strategy, manipulation into evidence, and uncertainty into clarity. The days after the courtroom revelation were tense yet quiet on the surface. People in our town of Plano carried on with their daily lives, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed in our household. But for me, the tension was far from over. Olivia was not the type to accept defeat easily. I could feel her lurking, waiting for an opportunity to retaliate, to regain control. My instincts told me that this battle was far from finished. I spent those days meticulously going over every single piece of evidence I had collected. Each document, each email, each hidden note painted a fuller picture of her greed and cunning. Olivia had been attempting to move assets to offshore accounts, manipulate legal papers, and even influence family members against James. I realized that her strategies were not just audacious, they were criminal. And I had to be even more careful. One evening, I came across an old ledger that Olivia had carelessly left in her apartment. It wasn't obvious at first glance, but as I flipped through it, my heart raced. This ledger detailed payments, transfers, and even instructions on how she had manipulated people into helping her schemes. It confirmed my suspicions. She had been planning to leave the country with all the assets, leaving James and me powerless. My hands shook, but I reminded myself to stay calm. Panic would ruin everything I had worked for. I realized I needed a plan, a carefully calculated one. Olivia had underestimated me at every turn, and that was her biggest mistake. I began preparing for the next court session, this time armed not just with evidence, but with a strategy to dismantle her credibility completely. I documented every detail meticulously, cross-referencing each fact, each date, each transaction. My experience and patience had become my greatest weapons. As I worked late into the night, James would occasionally peek into my study, worry etched on his face. "Mom, are you sure we can stop her?" he would ask. I would smile softly, trying to reassure him. "James, I have a plan. We just need to be patient and precise. Trust me." And he did. That trust, that quiet faith fueled my determination even more. The next twist came when I discovered a shocking piece of information about Olivia's past. She had a history of exploiting people, manipulating them for financial gain, and even leaving evidence strategically to mislead anyone who might suspect her. I realized that not only was she dangerous to our family, but she had a dangerous pattern of behavior that could repeat itself if left unchecked. I knew that exposing her in court was not just about protecting James. It was about stopping her before she could harm anyone else. Days later, we returned to the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating. I could see Olivia's eyes darting nervously, aware that her plans were fragile, that her carefully crafted persona was about to crumble. The judge, familiar with the previous proceedings, watched us keenly, but little did he know the full extent of what I was about to reveal. When it was my turn, I spoke calmly but firmly. I presented the ledger. When I presented the ledger, the offshore account details, and the carefully documented email exchanges, I showed how Olivia had tried to manipulate legal documents, how she had planned to secure assets under her name, and how she had intended to leave the country with everything. Each revelation landed like a blow, and I could see the tension in her posture grow. Then I carefully revealed her involvement in the past murder. I did not dramatize. It was a calm, factual presentation. I had every detail, every evidence point meticulously verified. The courtroom gasped as the full scope of her actions became clear. Every scheme, every manipulation, every act of greed was now exposed. Olivia's smugness had vanished, replaced by panic and disbelief. James sat beside me, quietly observing, and I could see his eyes welling up with tears, not of fear, but of relief and gratitude. He finally understood the lengths I had gone to protect him, the nights I had spent piecing together the truth, and the risks I had taken to ensure justice. After presenting everything, the judge leaned forward, visibly astonished. He had never seen such a meticulous, well-documented case presented by a family member in such a composed, strategic manner. I could sense Olivia's panic, her plans crumbling, her lies exposed, and her credibility destroyed. The evidence left no room for doubt. Justice was inevitable. As the session ended, I felt a wave of relief, but I knew this was only a milestone, not the end. Olivia was exposed, but her cunning nature meant that she could attempt further manipulations if given a chance. I resolved to remain vigilant, ensuring that our family and our assets remained protected. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. The months of observation, patience, and strategic action had paid off. I had protected my son, exposed the truth, and ensured that justice was served. But most importantly, I had learned that vigilance, courage, and careful planning were the tools that would always allow me to face challenges head on. After the courtroom revelations, the air at home felt tense yet strangely liberating. I could finally breathe, knowing that the first phase of justice had been served. But deep inside, I knew Olivia's manipulations were far from over. She was cunning, patient, and dangerously ambitious. I couldn't afford to underestimate her, not even for a second. One morning, as I sat in my study in Plano, Texas, I reflected on the months that had passed, the sleepless nights, the careful tracking of her every move, and the painstaking gathering of evidence. It all flashed before my eyes. I had realized long ago that Olivia's threat was not just financial. It was psychological, emotional, and potentially deadly. She was a master manipulator, skilled in turning small incidents into major disasters. It was during one of these quiet mornings that I discovered yet another layer of her plan. Olivia had cleverly created hidden accounts disguised as minor personal funds, but in reality, they were siphoning off assets meant for our family. She had also bribed certain legal intermediaries to ensure that any challenge to her actions would appear baseless. My heart raced as I realized the complexity of her schemes. But instead of fear, I felt determination. I would expose her fully, and this time no loophole would remain. I also discovered subtle hints of her attempts to intimidate James. Small threats, anonymous messages, and minor legal distractions were all part of her calculated plan to wear him down. I immediately reinforced our protection measures, ensuring that James would remain unaware of the full extent of her threats until the proper moment. This strategy was crucial. He had to be shielded from panic while I dismantled her plans systematically. As days turned into weeks, I meticulously documented everything: the ledger entries, suspicious bank transfers, hidden notes, and even her personal interactions. All were organized into a clear narrative that would leave no doubt in court. I felt a sense of power in this precision. Olivia's attempts to confuse or mislead us would fail because every detail was accounted for. Then came the most chilling discovery. I realized that Olivia had intended to commit yet another crime to secure her escape with the assets. This time, she planned to frame James for a violent act that never occurred. The audacity of her scheme was shocking, but I was ready. I created a comprehensive counter narrative supported by irrefutable evidence. Every potential trap she had laid for us was now turned into proof of her malice. One evening, I sat down with James to explain the situation. Oh, in broad terms, James, Olivia has a plan, and it's bigger than we imagined. But we're ready. I told him. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and trust. Mom, how do you always see through her? He asked. I smiled faintly. Experience, James. That's all it takes. The day of the next court session arrived. The atmosphere outside the courthouse was thick with anticipation. I could feel the tension in Olivia's posture as she entered, trying to maintain her usual confidence. But this time, I wasn't just a mother fighting for her son. I was a strategist revealing every deceit, every crime, and every manipulation she had committed. When I began to speak, I maintained a calm, unwavering tone. I presented the hidden accounts, the ledger, and evidence of her bribery attempts. I carefully narrated the subtle threats she had made towards James and documented her plan to frame him. Each piece of evidence landed with precision, leaving no room for doubt. The courtroom audience shifted uncomfortably as Olivia's web of lies began to unravel before them. Then I revealed her ultimate plan, the intent to leave the country with all the assets, her schemes to manipulate legal documents, and the crimes she had committed to secure her wealth. I did not dramatize. I simply presented the facts methodically and with precision. The judge and courtroom observers were visibly shaken. The smirk that Olivia had carried so confidently was gone, replaced by panic and desperation. I felt the moment of quiet satisfaction as I saw James's eyes fill with relief. For the first time, he understood the depth of the threat and the meticulous care I had taken to protect him. The months of careful observation, evidence collection, and strategic planning were now paying off in full. By the end of the session, the court had fully acknowledged the extent of Olivia's manipulations. Her access to our assets was blocked, her schemes were documented, and her credibility was destroyed. Justice, slow but certain, had been served. I felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph as I left the courtroom, knowing that the months of patience and strategy had been worth every sleepless night. Even as I returned home, I knew vigilance was still required. Olivia's cunning nature meant she could attempt further manipulation if given a chance, but I had learned that with careful planning, patience, and evidence-backed strategy, any challenge could be met and defeated. The experience had strengthened not only James and myself, but also my resolve to face any future challenges with clarity, courage, and precision. The days following the courtroom session were some of the most intense of my life. Even though we had successfully exposed Olivia's manipulations, I knew she wasn't finished. Her desperation had grown, and desperation often leads to reckless, dangerous decisions. I could sense the tension in every phone call, every email, and even in the subtle glances she attempted to cast our way. I spent hours in my study reviewing the evidence we had presented in court, double checking every detail. Nothing could be left uncertain. Olivia had proven time and again that she would exploit even the smallest loopholes. So every document, every ledger, every note needed to be airtight. I meticulously organized the files by date, by type, by relevance, ensuring that nothing could be challenged. James was anxious, though he tried to hide it. I could see the stress in his eyes. "Mom, what if she tries something drastic?" he asked one evening, pacing the living room. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "James, listen to me carefully. She may try, but we are prepared. We have the evidence and we know her every move. Nothing can catch us off guard now." His shoulders relaxed slightly, but I could tell the weight of fear was still there. It was during one of these nights of preparation that I discovered a hidden USB drive in Olivia's study, left behind carelessly in a rush to cover tracks. When I examined it, my heart raced. The drive contained files documenting her plans to manipulate property ownership, forge signatures, and even falsify legal documents to make it appear that James had mismanaged assets. It was proof of premeditation, and it left no room for doubt about her intentions. I also found detailed plans indicating her intention to commit fraud overseas. She had intended to move large sums of money and valuable properties to foreign accounts under pseudonyms. I realized that this wasn't just about control or revenge. It was about greed, pure and simple. Olivia wanted total domination over our assets, and she had devised a complex web to ensure she could leave the country without interference. The next challenge was psychological. Olivia had begun to try and manipulate those close to James and me friends, distant relatives, even legal advisors. She sent subtle threats, half truths, and emotional manipulations to create confusion and doubt. I knew I had to act carefully to protect James from emotional trauma while still gathering more evidence of her deceit. One evening, as I reflected on the months of stress, I realized that Olivia's schemes were not just about wealth, they were about control and power. Every action she had taken, every lie she had constructed was designed to make us dependent on her and to undermine our confidence. I had to remain strong, not just for James, but for myself. I needed to ensure that her influence would never reach us again. The next court session approached, and I was ready. I had compiled the USB evidence, the ledger entries, the bank transactions, and records of her manipulations. Every document was cross-verified and timestamped. I had also prepared statements showing how she had intended to commit fraud and potentially implicate James. The goal was clear: complete transparency and exposing every layer of her deceit. As I walked into the courtroom, I could feel the tension in the air. Olivia tried to maintain her usual confident demeanor, but I could sense cracks forming. The judge and legal staff looked at me curiously, aware that I was fully prepared this time. I spoke calmly, presenting each piece of evidence methodically. Every revelation brought a reaction, a gasp here, a murmured question there. Olivia's smirk began to fade, replaced by visible anxiety. Then came the most critical moment. I exposed her fraudulent plans involving overseas accounts and property transfers. I explained how she had attempted to manipulate legal documents to her advantage, and her plan to leave the country with our assets, Every detail was supported by solid evidence. The courtroom was silent, hanging on to each word as I outlined the full extent of her malicious intent. James sat quietly beside me, absorbing every detail. I could see the relief in his eyes, not just for the evidence, but for the protection and foresight I had provided. He finally understood that every sleepless night I had endured, every minute I had spent tracking Olivia's moves was for him and for our family's safety. By the end of the session, Olivia's credibility was completely destroyed. The judge acknowledged the thoroughness of our evidence, blocking her access to any assets and ensuring that her manipulations could no longer threaten us. Justice, though delayed, was finally precise and complete. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Months of meticulous planning, careful observation, and strategic execution had culminated in success. Yet deep down, I knew vigilance was still necessary. Olivia's cunning nature meant she could attempt another scheme if given the chance. But now, with every record documented and every plan revealed, I felt ready to face whatever came next. This experience had reinforced an essential truth: patience, observation, and careful strategy were the strongest tools against deceit. And as I glanced at James, I realized that not only had I protected him and our assets, but I had also instilled in him a lasting lesson in vigilance and justice. After the courtroom session, the tension didn't fade. It thickened. Olivia's desperation became palpable, like a storm waiting to break. I knew that a woman so determined to manipulate and control wouldn't give up easily. Each day felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between vigilance and exhaustion. I spent mornings reviewing the evidence once again, ensuring every paper, email, and ledger entry was flawless. Olivia had proven time and again that she would exploit even the smallest loophole, and I could not afford to leave a single detail unchecked. The USB drive I had discovered in Part 5 was particularly critical. It contained every plan she had devised to manipulate property, finances, and even James's reputation. I knew that presenting this meticulously would be key in the upcoming legal battle. One night, while going through some old old family records, I found additional proof that linked Olivia to other past manipulations, including instances where she had framed people for her own gain. This was chilling. Her ability to deceive and plan ahead was frightening, but it also gave me more leverage. I realized that exposing the full pattern of her behavior would not only protect our family, but also ensure she couldn't harm anyone else. I started preparing my strategy for the next court session. I needed to be precise, calm, and unshakable. This was not just about exposing her greed. It was about revealing the depths of her manipulation, her plans for violence, and her intentions to escape with assets. Every detail had to be presented in a way that the court could see her full intent and malice. James, of course, remained anxious. He would sometimes ask me, "Mom, what if she tries something drastic again?" I reassured him, "James, she may try, but she cannot succeed. We have documented everything, and I am prepared for every possible move." His eyes, though worried, reflected trust, and that trust strengthened my resolve even more. The day of the court session arrived. As we entered, I could see Olivia's forced composure. She tried to maintain her air of confidence, but the subtle signs of anxiety betrayed her. The judge and attendees looked at me expectantly, knowing that I had already exposed parts of her schemes before, but today they would see the full extent. I began calmly presenting the new evidence I had discovered, proof of previous manipulations, attempts to frame others, and detailed plans for taking control of assets. I showed her strategy to move funds abroad and manipulate legal documents to make it appear that James had mishandled everything. Each piece of evidence landed with precision, leaving little room for doubt. Then I revealed the most shocking aspect, Olivia's intent to commit further crimes if her plans were interrupted. I detailed her plan to frame James for actions he never committed and her attempts to intimidate family members. The courtroom gasped as the full scope of her criminal intent became clear. Olivia's smirk, which she had carried so confidently, vanished completely, replaced by panic and desperation. I watched James closely. He was absorbing every detail, finally understanding the sheer extent of the danger we had faced. But the relief in his eyes was unmistakable. He realized that every sleepless night I had endured, every careful observation, and every strategic move had been to protect him and secure justice. By the end of the session, Olivia's plans were dismantled. The judge confirmed that her access to family assets would be permanently blocked, and her credibility was completely destroyed. Justice, which had seemed slow and painstaking, had finally reached a decisive turning point. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, exhaustion, and empowerment all mingled within me. I had managed to protect my son, expose the truth, and dismantle Olivia's manipulations. Yet, deep inside, I knew vigilance was still essential. Olivia's cunning nature meant she could attempt new schemes, but now, with every record documented and every plan exposed, her power was significantly diminished. That night at home in Plano, I reflected on the journey. Months of patience, observation, and meticulous planning had led to this moment. I had protected my family, ensured justice, and reclaimed peace of mind. And most importantly, I had demonstrated to James the power of careful strategy, foresight, and courage. No matter what challenges lay ahead, we were now ready. The days after the last court session were a whirlwind of tension and anticipation. Olivia, having been exposed in court, became more unpredictable. I could sense her frustration and desperation, and I knew that a woman so cunning and determined could attempt anything when cornered. Every step had to be measured, every move calculated. I spent hours in my study reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, and every record of her manipulations. The USB drive alone contained a map of her schemes that spanned months, even years. She had carefully hidden her tracks, but nothing was beyond detection if one looked closely. I had meticulously cross-referenced bank statements, property deeds, and email trails. I wanted to ensure that nothing could be dismissed or overlooked in court. One evening, while going through old correspondences, I discovered a hidden set of emails in which Olivia had tried to bribe a legal advisor to manipulate the court's decisions. Her audacity was shocking, yet it gave me more leverage. Each email, each hidden note became a piece of the puzzle that I would later present to the judge, ensuring that her credibility was shattered beyond repair. I also discovered her plan to create a false narrative about James mismanaging family assets. She intended to leave the country with valuable properties and funds, blaming James for any discrepancies. This revelation was chilling, but I remained calm. I had anticipated her moves and had documented everything with precision. James was increasingly anxious about Olivia's unpredictable behavior. Mom, what if she tries something drastic, something illegal? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. I held his hands and looked him in the eyes. James, listen to me. She may try, but she won't succeed. We have all the evidence and we know her every move. Nothing can catch us off guard now. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but the fear in his eyes reminded me of how close we had come to disaster. The next court session was set, and I knew this would be the final showdown. Olivia's smirk of confidence was gone, replaced by tension and nervous glances. The judge, aware of the complexity of her schemes, observed me carefully. I began presenting my case methodically, starting with her attempts to bribe advisors and manipulate legal documents. Each revelation landed with weight, leaving the courtroom silent and attentive. Then came the most critical moment. I revealed her plan to leave the country with all assets, her manipulation of property records, and her attempts to frame James. I presented her hidden accounts, emails, and forged documents showing how she intended to escape with everything. The courtroom gasped as the full scope of her intent became visible. Olivia's confident demeanor crumbled, replaced by panic and desperation. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Every detail, every document, every email was now undeniable proof of her malice. I could see the shock in the judge's eyes, and the tension in Olivia's posture was almost palpable. She had underestimated me at every turn, but I had been patient, meticulous, and strategic. Now, her carefully constructed plans were falling apart. James, sitting beside me, finally understood the depth of the threat. He realized that every sleepless night I had endured, every moment spent tracking Olivia's moves, had been to protect him and secure justice. The relief in his eyes was immense, and I could see the trust and gratitude he felt. By the end of the session, Olivia's credibility was completely destroyed. Her access to family assets was blocked, which her manipulations were fully exposed, and the judge confirmed that she would face legal consequences for her schemes. Justice, precise and unwavering, had finally been delivered. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Months of patience, careful observation, and strategic execution had led to this moment. I had protected my son, reclaimed control of our assets, and ensured that Olivia's manipulations could no longer threaten us. Yet I remained vigilant. Olivia's cunning nature meant she could attempt new schemes if given the chance. But with every record documented and every plan exposed, her power was significantly diminished. That night, I reflected on the journey, the months of sleepless nights, careful monitoring, and meticulous planning had not only protected James and our family, but had also strengthened my resolve. I realized that with patience, strategy, and determination, even the most cunning adversary could be outmaneuvered. This experience had taught me invaluable lessons about vigilance, foresight, and the power of evidence-backed strategy. Even after Olivia's exposure in court, the atmosphere in our home remained tense. I could feel her desperation brewing like a storm ready to strike. She had lost the first battle, but I knew she was capable of trying extreme measures to regain control. Every step I took had to be calculated, every action deliberate. I could not afford even a single lapse. I dedicated hours to scrutinizing every record, every ledger, and every correspondence. The USB drive alone had revealed so much about her intentions, plans to transfer property abroad, manipulate legal documents, and falsely accuse James. I meticulously organized everything into folders, annotated each item, and prepared multiple copies for court. My goal was clear. Olivia would have no chance to twist the narrative or manipulate Richette Bay again. One evening, while reviewing her emails, I discovered a chilling new plan. Olivia had documented steps to forge additional documents and even manipulate witnesses. She intended to hire individuals to intimidate family members and legal advisors. The depth of her malice shocked me, but I remained calm. This was why preparation was essential. I knew every move she could make and anticipated it carefully. James was more anxious than ever. Mom, she's still dangerous. What if she tries something desperate before the next court session? He asked, his voice trembling. I held his hands and reassured him. James, she may try, but she won't succeed. Every detail is documented. We are ready for her. Nothing can catch us unprepared now. Eyes reflected, a mix of fear and trust. He was beginning to realize the weight of responsibility I had carried for him all these months. As the next court session approached, I could sense Olivia's anxiety. Her confident demeanor had vanished, replaced by subtle signs of panic and frustration. I knew she was aware that her plans could no longer be executed without being exposed. I arrived at the courtroom early, my folder of evidence in hand, ready to systematically dismantle her schemes. The judge's eyes were on me, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation reflecting in them. I began calmly presenting the first layer of evidence, her forged documents, false witness statements, and plans to manipulate property ownership. Each revelation left the courtroom silent, the weight of her deceit becoming increasingly apparent. Olivia's panic was growing visibly. Then I revealed her plans to physically intimidate and manipulate others to cover her track. I showed detailed emails, screenshots, and records of payments she intended to make to individuals to enforce her control. The courtroom gasped. Every piece of evidence was methodically presented, leaving no room for denial. Olivia's expression transformed from nervousness to outright fear. James watched beside me, finally understanding the full scope of Olivia's intentions. Grief mixed with astonishment filled his eyes. He realized that every sleepless night, every careful observation, and every strategic move I had made had been to protect him from harm and ensure justice prevailed. I could see the gratitude and trust he felt, and it strengthened my resolve even more. By the end of the session, the court had a complete understanding of Olivia's schemes. Her credibility was shattered, her access to assets permanently blocked, and legal measures were put in place to prevent any future manipulations. Justice, precise and unwavering, had finally been delivered. Walking out of the courthouse, a sense of calm mixed with exhaustion enveloped me. Months of vigilance, strategic planning, and careful observation had culminated in a clear victory. I had successfully protected my son, reclaimed control over our family assets, and exposed every deceit Olivia had attempted. Yet, I knew that complete peace would require continued alertness for someone as cunning as Olivia could attempt unexpected moves if given the chance. That night at home in Plano, I reflected on the journey. The long hours, sleepless nights, and meticulous planning had not been in vain. We had faced a cunning adversary, exposed her manipulations, and ensured that justice prevailed. I had not only protected James and our family, but had also instilled in him the importance of vigilance, strategy, and courage. This experience reinforced a lesson that would stay with me forever. Patience, careful observation, and unwavering strategy are the greatest weapons against deceit. And as I looked at James and it I knew that the battles we had fought were not just for assets or reputation. They were for the safety, truth, and integrity of our family. The tension had reached a boiling point. Olivia, having been exposed multiple times, was now fully aware that her previous strategies had failed. I could sense her desperation radiating like a storm about to break, but I remained calm, composed, and ready. Every move she could make, every trick she might attempt, I had anticipated it all. The day of the next court session arrived. I entered the courtroom with my folder meticulously organized, my nerves steady. The judge glanced at me with a subtle nod of acknowledgement. This was more than a case of property and manipulation. It was a test of patience, strategy, and resilience. Olivia tried to maintain her composure, but her trembling hands betrayed her. I began presenting evidence that revealed her most dangerous and manipulative moves. Emails showing bribery attempts, false witness arrangements, and her plans to escape with family assets were laid bare. Each revelation was precise and undeniable, leaving no room for doubt. Olivia's attempts to manipulate and intimidate were fully exposed, and the courtroom absorbed every detail in stunned silence. Then came the most shocking revelation. I unveiled the documents proving her involvement in a past criminal act of murder committed for financial gain, carefully concealed with manipulated evidence. The courtroom gasped. Her confidence shattered completely as the gravity of her actions became undeniable. The judge's eyes widened in disbelief, and even her legal team appeared stunned. I explained how she had attempted to frame James for mismanagement, detailing her plan to transfer property and assets out of the country. Every detail, from forged signatures to hidden accounts, was documented meticulously. The evidence left the court no choice but to see through her manipulations. Olivia's face turned pale. Her smirk was gone, replaced by panic and desperation. James sat beside me, tense but trusting. He realized for the first time the full extent of the danger we had faced. Every sleepless night, every careful observation, and every strategic step I had taken to protect him became clear to him now. I could see the gratitude and relief in his eyes, and that strengthened my resolve even further. As I continued presenting the evidence, the judge asked pointed questions, confirming details and clarifying the extent of Olivia's schemes. The courtroom was silent except for my voice explaining the meticulous planning and deceit she had employed. Each answer reinforced the truth and made it impossible for Olivia to deny her intentions. Finally, I revealed the full picture, her plan to manipulate everyone, take control of the family's assets, and escape without consequence. I showed the court the tangible proof documents, emails, and records of every transaction and plan. The judge leaned forward, clearly impressed with the precision and detail of the evidence. Olivia, now cornered and defeated, tried to respond, but her words were weak and unconvincing. The courtroom watched as her manipulations were dismantled piece by piece. every attempt she had made to frame James or manipulate the system had been neutralized. Justice was unfolding before everyone's eyes. By the end of the session, the court confirmed the final decisions. Olivia's access to assets was permanently blocked, her credibility destroyed, and she would face legal consequences for her manipulations. The relief I felt was profound, but so was the exhaustion. Months of vigilance, careful observation, and strategy had finally culminated in a decisive victory. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a mixture of triumph and fatigue. The journey had been long, the battles exhausting, but every moment had been worth it. I had protected my son, reclaimed our family's integrity, and exposed every deceit Olivia had tried to enact. Yet, I knew the lesson was clear. Vigilance and strategy were crucial, for a cunning adversary could attempt new schemes if given the chance. That evening, back in Plano, I reflected on the months of struggle, sleepless nights, careful planning, and patient observation had led to this moment of justice. I had not only safeguarded my son and family assets, but it also proven that patience, strategy, and courage could overcome even the most cunning adversary. The victory was not just legal, it was personal. I had protected my family, revealed the truth, and reclaimed peace. James understood now in full measure the lengths I had gone to protect him. And as I looked at him, I knew that we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more prepared for any future challenges. The courtroom felt heavier that day. Every eye fixed on Olivia as I prepared to deliver the final pieces of evidence. I had spent months meticulously documenting her manipulations, and now it was time for justice to be fully realized. My heart was calm, though my mind raced with the weight of responsibility. I had to ensure James's safety, protect our family assets, and expose every deceit she had attempted. As I began, I could see Olivia's trembling hands and pale face. Her confidence from previous sessions had vanished completely. I presented a final set of evidence showing her detailed plans to escape the country with properties and assets, along with manipulated documents meant to frame James. The courtroom gasped at the sheer audacity of her schemes. Then I revealed the most shocking element, her involvement in a murder committed years ago for financial gain. I explained how she had planned to use the crime to manipulate circumstances in her favor. I displayed the physical evidence she had hidden, the knife she had intended to plant, and the money she had kept. Every detail was meticulously documented and undeniable. Olivia's attempts to speak were feeble and unconvincing. The judge, visibly stunned, leaned forward. "Margaret, this evidence is comprehensive and damning. How did you uncover all of this?" I maintained my calm demeanor and replied, "Patience, observation, and careful documentation. Every detail mattered. Every move she made was tracked and recorded." The weight of my words settled over the courtroom. James sat beside me, visibly relieved. He had watched every stage of this ordeal, but seeing the full extent of Olivia's deception laid bare brought him peace. I could see the gratitude in his eyes, the trust and the acknowledgement of everything I had done to protect him. It was a quiet victory, but one that resonated deeply with both of us. Olivia, now cornered beyond repair, could not defend her actions. Every attempt at manipulation had failed. Her credibility was destroyed. Her access to family assets permanently revoked, and legal measures were in place to prevent any future schemes. Justice, precise and unwavering, had been delivered. After the session, as we left the courtroom, a sense of calm washed over me. The months of sleepless nights, constant vigilance, and careful strategy had culminated in a triumph that was both legal and personal. James and I had reclaimed control of our lives, ensured the truth was revealed, and neutralized a threat that had loomed over us for far too long. That night, reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I had grown through this ordeal. The experience had taught me patience, foresight, and the power of unwavering strategy. I had faced a cunning adversary and anticipated every move and ensured that justice was served not just for me, but for my son and our family's integrity. In the quiet of our home in Plano, I felt the weight of relief and accomplishment. The battles had been exhausting, but every sleepless night, every careful observation, and every calculated move had been worth it. Olivia's schemes were fully exposed, her manipulations dismantled, and her attempts to harm James thwarted. Looking at James, I knew that this experience had strengthened both of us. We were more vigilant, more prepared, and more aware of the lengths to which someone could go for greed and power. But we had emerged victorious, guided by patience, strategy, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. As I closed the folders of evidence and set them aside, I knew that the battle was over. Olivia would face the consequences of her actions, and our family could finally breathe freely. The months of tension, manipulation, and suspense had ended, leaving us with clarity, justice, and a renewed sense of security. In the end, I realized that true victory was not only in exposing deceit, but in ensuring that truth and integrity prevailed. James understood this now, and together we had turned a dangerous and cunning adversary's plans into a lesson of patience, vigilance, and strategy. Our journey had been long and arduous, but it had forged resilience, courage, and a bond between mother and son that could withstand any future challenge. And as we looked forward, we knew that no matter what came next, we were prepared, informed, and united in our commitment to truth and justice. Even after the courtroom battles, the tension in our home slowly began to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. But I knew better than to relax completely. Olivia had proven to be a cunning adversary. And while her schemes had been exposed, her presence still lingered as a shadow over our lives. I spent the following weeks ensuring that every document, every piece of evidence, and every precaution was in place. Nothing could be left vulnerable. I often sat in my study reviewing records and cross-referencing details. I thought about how Olivia had tried to manipulate everyone, how she had plotted to frame James and escape with our family's wealth. But I also reflected on how far I had come from sleepless nights of worry to methodical preparation, transforming fear into strategic action. I realized that this journey had not only protected my family, but had also strengthened my own resilience. James, though still processing the events, began to regain a sense of normalcy. I could see the relief in his demeanor, the way he finally started to trust that our lives could return to some semblance of calm. But I also knew that part of growing up was understanding the depth of deceit that can exist in the world. I shared with him slowly and carefully the lessons I had learned. Vigilance, patience, and strategy are more than tools, they are shields. One day, as I reviewed Olivia's attempts to manipulate witnesses and transfer property, I realized something deeper about human nature. Greed, desperation, and the desire for control can drive people to unimaginable lengths. But truth, careful planning, and moral courage can counter even the most calculated deceit. I felt proud, not just for the legal victory, but for the demonstration of integrity that had guided every step of my actions. G had already taken note of the comprehensive evidence I presented, but I knew that reinforcing the facts would prevent any future attempts to undermine the case. It was about more than just winning. It was about securing the future for James and our family. In private moments, I reflected on the tension, fear, and uncertainty that had dominated our lives. Each night, I thought of the lessons these months had imparted, that vigilance requires patience, courage must be combined with strategy, and that even in the face of a formidable adversary, persistence and planning can achieve justice. I realized that the journey had changed me, making me wiser, stronger, and more aware of the fragility and value of trust. The final session of the court was approaching, and I felt ready, armed with reinforced evidence, meticulously organized records, and a calm confidence. I stepped into the courtroom with the sense of quiet determination. The judge's eyes met mine, reflecting acknowledgement and subtle curiosity. I knew that this final step would cement the outcome and ensure that no further manipulations could threaten our family. As I presented Olivia's last attempts at deception, the courtroom witnessed the full spectrum of her manipulation, forged documents, attempts to bribe and influence witnesses, and plans to escape with assets. Each detail was precise, undeniable, and strategically highlighted. Olivia's panic was palpable. The weight of her actions finally pressed upon her in full force. James watched beside me, his trust in me solidified by the clarity of truth unfolding. He understood now in a profound way the meticulous care I had taken to protect him and our family. The victory was not only legal, but personal, a testament to the power of foresight, strategy, and unwavering resolve. The sun was setting over Plano, painting golden hues across our home. For the first time in months, a sense of calm settled over me. The battles in the courtroom were over. Olivia's schemes had been fully exposed, her credibility destroyed, and the legal system had finally recognized the truth. But beyond the law, the emotional weight lifted from my shoulders was profound. I reflected on the months of tension and fear, the sleepless nights, the meticulous planning, and the constant vigilance that had defined our lives. Every strategy I had implemented, every document I had prepared, and every careful observation had culminated in this moment. I had protected James, reclaimed our family's integrity, and exposed deceit in its entirety. Sitting in my favorite chair, I looked at James. He was finally able to smile freely, unburdened by fear and manipulation. I realized that the most important victory was not just legal or financial, it was emotional. We had emerged stronger, more connected, and aware of the lengths people could go for greed and control. But we had also learned that patience, strategy, and courage could overcome even the most cunning adversaries. In the quiet of our home, I revisited the lessons I had imparted throughout this ordeal. Greed and desperation could drive people to unimaginable lengths, but truth, integrity, and careful planning could dismantle even the most complex deceptions. Every sleepless night and every strategic move had been worth it. I understood now that vigilance is not just about defense. It is a form of empowerment. I also reflected on Olivia's downfall. Her desperation, greed, and manipulations had ultimately led to her undoing the murder, the bribery, the deceit, all meticulously documented and exposed, had left her powerless. I had not only protected James and our family assets, but had also ensured that justice prevailed in its most thorough form. As I walked through our home, I could sense a renewed sense of safety. Every corner, every room was no longer overshadowed by fear or uncertainty. The evidence and records that had been my shield were now a testament to resilience and foresight. We could finally breathe freely, knowing that the truth had been revealed and the futures. I remembered the moment when the judge had first glanced at me during the courtroom sessions. The surprise and curiosity in his eyes had been a reflection of the impact of truth and preparation. It was not about intimidation or anger. It was about clarity, strategy, and unwavering resolve. That moment symbolized the turning point where patience and foresight had overcome deception. James approached me later that evening, gratitude and admiration in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't know how you managed all of this, but I'm so grateful. You protected me, our family, and made sure the truth came out." I smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. It was never just about protecting assets, I told him. It was about protecting our integrity, our family, and ensuring that truth and justice always prevail. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the journey. The fear, the tension, and the uncertainty had all transformed into clarity, resilience, and empowerment. We had faced a cunning adversary, navigated deception, and emerged victorious, not just legally, but emotionally and morally. It was a triumph that reaffirmed the value of vigilance, strategy, and unwavering courage. Looking toward the future, I knew that the lessons we had learned would stay with us forever. We were prepared for any challenge, informed about the dangers of manipulation, and strengthened by the experience. The months of strategy, observation, and careful planning had forged a bond between James and me that was unbreakable. Finally, as I lay down to rest, I allowed myself a deep breath. The long journey had ended, the truth had been revealed, and our lives could finally move forward with peace, clarity, and justice. The lessons of patience, courage, and strategy would forever guide us, ensuring that no deception could threaten our family again. This was more than a legal victory. It was a personal triumph, a testament to resilience, foresight, and the enduring strength of a mother protecting her family. And as the night settled over our home, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, closure, and hope for the future. As I finished telling you everything that happened, I want you to pause for a moment and think about it. Life can be unpredictable, and sometimes people around us may not be what they seem, but with patience, awareness, and courage, even the most difficult challenges can be faced and overcome. If you found my story intriguing, shocking, or even inspiring, don't forget to like this video. Your support means the world, and it helps me share more stories like this. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell